Sorry, Morgan, I'm gonna have to cut you off right there, Chase said, grinning like he'd just invented fire. He tapped something on his keyboard. My mic light went red. Muted. In front of 64 people. I sat there frozen, staring at my own face on the Zoom grid while he blurted, "Big news, team. We're officially outsourcing Morgan's legacy compliance system. It's a new era. Cost efficiency meets innovation. She'll assist in the handoff, of course." My own name being weaponized against me while I was silenced like a child. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I reached beside me, picked up the company badge I'd worn for 8 years, held it to the camera, then followed it with the printed resignation letter I'd signed an hour earlier. I didn't say a single word, just looked straight into the lens. The window of smiling faces began going still, one by one. The HR director's jaw fell open. Our legal counsel, Av Vaughn, stood up from his desk and turned to the founder. I read his lips before he even made a sound. Please tell me she didn't just quit. Before we go any further, if you're still watching and you want more of these true corporate chaos stories, hit that like button and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, but it helps the team keep digging up the wildest stories they can find. Now, back to it. The funny thing about working in compliance is nobody notices you until the floorboards are already on fire. For the past 8 years, I was the last person most executives thought about. I didn't take credit, didn't climb ladders, didn't do birthday sheet cake in the break room. I designed the system that made sure no one went to jail. That was enough. My domain was regulatory infrastructure for a massive federal vendor contract, platform authentication, audit pipeline, cloud compliance, incident response, all humming under my fingertips. I didn't do innovation, I did prevention, which, in our world, is code for boring but lethal if done wrong. Chase Drummond had never written a line of code, couldn't tell a SOC2 from a grocery receipt, but he had one hell of a LinkedIn banner. His dad was our VP of Ops, and 6 weeks ago he waltzed into the org chart as Senior Innovation Officer, 27 years old, fresh off a marketing internship and already talking about transformative offshoring. He showed up at my team's stand-up on a Monday with oat milk in a Yeti and started asking what he called philosophical questions, like, what if we rebuilt this whole system using AI? Or, does it really matter if the servers are compliant if no one checks? At first I thought it was a prank. Then I realized he was serious and dangerous. He kept circling our budget, asking if we really needed quarterly pen tests, if the incident response redundancy was a bit overkill, if we could cut audit dry runs to save cycle time. My warnings were polite, clinical. These are contractual obligations, not suggestions. But Chase was immune to tone. He only heard himself. The real flag went up when he started holding closed-door meetings with leadership, without me. He was just exploring options, he said. You'll be looped in when needed, he added with a smile, so fake it gave me a cavity. My direct reports started coming to me with rumors. Chase says we're getting replaced with a vendor out of Bangalore. He asked if you're open to pivoting into a different role. One of my engineers joked he'd Googled the vendor Chase liked. Their homepage still had lorem ipsum filler text. I did what I always do, documented everything, emailed quiet warnings, escalated once, gently. I wasn't afraid, not of losing my job. I was afraid of what he was about to do to a live federal system monitored by the feds. Clause 13F. I mentioned it twice in meetings, even slid it across the table in a printed copy. I am named key personnel, I said. I cannot be replaced without prior written approval from the client. If I am removed, the contract is subject to forfeiture. Chase laughed. We'll sort that out in post, he said. You worry too much. That's the problem with old schoolers. No imagination. The founder didn't defend me. He sat there blinking, like a man trying to remember which drawer he left his spine in. And now, here we were. I'd watched Chase's little Zoom circus play out without a word, without one tremble in my hand as I held up my badge and resignation. Not a goodbye email, not a Slack ping, not even a note in the shared doc. I was gone, and I knew what that meant. Chase didn't, but legal did, and somewhere, in a locked file folder with my initials, a clause had just started ticking. It started like most train wrecks do, behind closed doors with too much coffee and not enough context. The first whispers came from my team lead, Jenna, who caught the tail end of a calendar invite Chase forgot to mark private. Offshore strategy sync, phase 1, it read. No details, just him, 2 directors from finance, and some guy named Rakesh from a vendor I'd never heard of. I asked him straight up about it during our next ops huddle. Just spitballing, he said, spinning his damn Yeti mug like it held more IQ points than he did. We're looking into ways to modernize the compliance beast. Nothing final. He always used that word, beast, like the system I'd spent 8 years refining was some kind of rabid dog he needed to put down. Chase, I said, before you do anything, you need to understand something very simple. Clause 13F. It's in the federal contract. I am named key personnel. That designation cannot be bypassed. If I'm removed or replaced without written consent from the client, the contract is void within 30 days. He blinked, smiled like I'd just quoted ancient Greek. We'll sort it later, he said. It's just paper. Nobody actually enforces that stuff unless you piss off a senator. I looked around the table. No one moved. Not the CFO, not the director of ops, not even the founder, Alan, who was pretending to check his phone like a teenager grounded for homecoming. I expected someone, anyone, to back me up. But the only thing that filled the room was silence and the low hum of the HVAC. Later that week, I found a folder someone accidentally left open on a shared drive. Cost Savings Initiative, Q4. Inside, a bullet list. One item read, Offshore Transition of Compliance Platform, pending. ST 2.7 matters annual savings. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, not once, like I was already gone. I printed that list and walked straight into the founder's office. Not because I thought he'd stop it, but because I wanted it on record that I tried, that I warned them, that when the hammer fell, no one could say I'd stayed quiet. Alan, I said, placing the paper on his desk, you realize this is not just a poor decision, it's a contract violation waiting to happen. Chase has no authority to restructure the compliance operation without first securing client approval. And I am not just a name on an org chart, I'm a contractual asset. He didn't look at the printout, didn't even pretend to read it, just rubbed the bridge of his nose and muttered, Morgan, I appreciate your concern, but I think you're being territorial. Let's give Chase a little room. He's trying to innovate. That word again. Innovate, as if innovation meant tossing a lit match into a gas leak. Room to do what? I asked. Break federal protocol? Gamble with an $80 million contract because your VP's son wants to make a name for himself? Alan didn't answer. He just tapped his pen twice, like a gavel. Meeting over. After that, I stopped talking. Stopped warning. What was the point? My team kept bringing me scraps. Chase scheduling offshore discovery calls, spinning up vendor NDA requests without routing through legal. HR asked me if I'd consider a mentorship role for incoming consultants. That's how they tried to frame it. Mentorship. Not, we're pushing you out, just guide the people who'll take your job and call it leadership. But here's the thing about compliance. Real compliance. It's not just rules and reports. It's structure, sequencing, dependencies. The entire system was held together with a latticework of protocol that I'd spent years hardening piece by piece. Every access token, every authentication layer, every audit trigger, all legal, all logged, all mine. Chase couldn't just throw a switch and modernize. He didn't even know which parts required biometric verification, which ones needed sequential approvals. He was about to rip out the engine of a jetliner mid-flight and duct tape a Vespa motor to the wing. And the founder? He just stood there, holding the ladder while Chase climbed higher. The weirdest part? Nobody seemed afraid. Not yet. But they would be. Soon. I should have known something was off when I got the calendar invite and my talking time had been cut in half. Compliance prep. Q4 audit notes, Morgan 3 Minds. It read, 3 minutes. For a federal audit cycle that spanned 14 departments and 4 regulatory agencies. Cute. But I played along. Wore the same gray blazer I always wore when I needed to look unshakable. Hair back, no jewelry, just facts and fire suppression. I clicked into the Zoom call 1 minute early. 62 participants already in. Most of them muted, sipping coffee, waiting for the circus. Chase popped in at the top of the hour with that smug frat boy energy he probably thought passed for leadership. Hey, team, he grinned. Big day, big moves, let's make it count. I started sharing my screen the moment the meeting officially began. Morning all. As you know, the Q4 compliance window starts in 6 days. I want to quickly walk through the audit staging environment and the new sequence for validating our encryption logs before. Sorry, Morgan, Chase cut in. His voice had that performative chuckle baked in, like he was on a tech panel at South by Southwest. Gonna have to stop you there. Appreciate the diligence, but there's a bigger announcement we want to get to. Then I saw it. My mic icon turned red. Muted. I wasn't finished. I wasn't even halfway through the first slide. I looked down at my keyboard, confirmed it. Disabled. Host override. I glanced up and saw my own frozen expression reflecting back at me. Unblinking. Cold. Chase took center stage, standing in front of one of those stupid Think Big banners they'd hung behind the executive desks last year, like it was a startup from 2011. Team, he began, we're excited to share a bold new direction for the compliance platform. After thorough review and careful analysis, we've made the strategic decision to outsource key legacy systems to a specialized offshore partner who will modernize and streamline the infrastructure. He paused for applause. There was none. To ease the transition, Morgan will assist in the handover and documentation process. No worries there, she's got it all mapped out already, he said, smirking like this was his TED Talk moment. I felt my heart rate slow, not spike. That's how I knew I'd already made peace with this moment. I didn't feel rage, just calculation. I leaned off camera and picked up 2 things I'd prepared the night before. My badge, still clipped to the Navy lanyard from the 2019 Security Summit, and a white envelope with a single sheet of paper inside, dated, signed, time-stamped. Resignation letter. I held the badge up first, let it hang there in the frame, dead center, no expression, just stillness. Then the envelope. Printed text visible in bold, resignation of key personnel, effective immediately. 60 faces stared back at me. The interns looked confused. HR froze mid-sip. One of the engineers started to smile, thinking maybe this was some elaborate gag. Then I saw it. Legal. Evan. His face dropped like someone yanked the floor out from under him. He stood up so fast his office chair toppled behind him. He turned, off camera, toward someone standing just out of frame. His lips moved. One sentence, clear as day. Please tell me she didn't just quit. The founder, Alan, blinked. Color drained from his face like a slow fade to black. His hands twitched toward his laptop like he could rewind the moment, undo it, cancel. But the cameras were still on. Every exec, every junior hire, everyone on that call saw the same thing. A woman not yelling, not crying, not storming off. Just walking out of a burning building she'd warned them not to set on fire. I clicked leave meeting, and that was it. No Slack goodbye, no final email, just the sound of silence, and a clause in the contract they never bothered to read. First day without me, Chase posted a selfie to Slack. No joke. Big things ahead, compliance overhaul in motion, Naacha innovation era. I didn't see it, of course. Jenna screenshot it and sent it to my personal phone with one word. Seriously? Meanwhile, back at HQ, my absence wasn't just noticed, it was radioactive. The first clue was what didn't happen. No farewell email, no calendar blocks removed, no meeting declines, just an echo of everything I used to be part of, now sitting like a ghost in their schedules. People whispered. Quietly at first, then louder. Is she on vacation? Did Morgan get reassigned? Why are we still seeing her credentials flagged in the access logs? And legal. Legal was already in full cardiac arrest. See, that clause, 13F, it's not the kind of thing you trip over in casual reading. It's buried on page 78 of a 200-page federal compliance contract in a subsection that looks like boilerplate until it kicks you in the teeth. Termination or unapproved removal of named key personnel will render this contract subject to nullification within 30 business days, unless written consent for replacement is granted by the contracting officer. Guess who they didn't get written consent from? Guess who had already noticed? The client. The compliance window was in 19 days and change. Federal eyes were already watching. The system I built wasn't just infrastructure, it had real-time reporting. Real-time change tracking. My departure wasn't just visible, it was logged. The dashboard in legal's office had a section no one usually touched unless the sky was falling. Risk Matrix Live Feed. It lit up like a Christmas tree. Item number 1, Key Personnel Departure, unauthorized. Item number 2, Compliance Readiness, unstable. Item number 3, Transition Plan, not found. Then, at 3:22 p.m., another ping. Client Liaison, requested personnel status report. Chase had no answer, so he stalled. I'll handle it, he told the founder. Then, we're finalizing a backfill. Then, we're reworking the org chart. It's just temporary. All lies. Legal cornered him in a conference room. Alan, the founder, finally showed up too. Face gray, lips pressed tight like he was trying not to vomit. Evan, the company's top legal counsel, didn't mince words. We are in active breach of Clause 13F. You allowed her removal without client sign-off, without a transition document, and without protocol. She resigned, Chase argued, tone cracking for the first time since this whole circus started. That's not my fault. You muted her in front of 64 people, Evan fired back. You humiliated the only person on this contract whose name has legal teeth. Alan sat there silent. Like if he didn't speak, maybe the fine print would vanish. Evan continued, voice low but lethal. This contract is our Q4 revenue floor. If forfeited, the penalty is north of $80 million, not including reputation loss. Not including domino effect on subcontracts. And Chase? He had the nerve to shrug. I mean, worst case, he said. We hire someone and patch it. Nobody actually pulls contracts over this stuff. That's when Jenna texted me again. One line. They're still pretending you'll come back. I didn't respond. I was already somewhere else, watching, waiting, silent, and letting the weight of their arrogance settle where it belonged, directly on their necks. Day 4. That's when the cracks stopped being hairline and started swallowing floorboards. The offshore firm Chase handpicked, some shiny Bangalore outfit with a punchy name like Cypher Nova or Nova Cypher or whatever, sent their first transition query through the vendor portal. Basic stuff. Where to find staging credentials, sandbox instance passwords, and audit report templates. Jenna, still technically lead on compliance support, forwarded it to IT. IT forwarded it to Chase. Chase forwarded it to no one, because he didn't know. That's when the scramble began. By end of day, the new team hadn't been able to access a single core module, not the SSO validator, not the log review utility, not even the reporting dashboard. One of their engineers emailed back something Jenna shared with me later. We're seeing looped credential dependencies pointing to a secondary hash key that appears to be custom. Need root access to proceed. Also, the access doc has flags for biometric gate. That's when Chase picked up the phone and dialed IT like they were pizza delivery, told them to just override whatever I left behind. Let me explain something. I didn't booby-trap the system. That would have been childish. I made it compliant, which is worse for him, actually. See, the architecture wasn't built around trust. It was built around proof. Every credential dependency was logged, tiered, and access controlled under the Federal Information Security Management Act protocols. To access Tier 3 audit trails, which the new vendor needed, you had to pass a multi-step verification that included token, passphrase, and biometric. And guess who owned the biometric lock? Not Chase. Not IT. Me. The system hadn't been locked against them. It had just been built so tightly that there was no workaround, not without triggering audit flags, not without breaking the very regulations they were trying to pass off to a third party. So IT called an emergency sync with legal, and legal called an emergency sync with Chase, and Chase called me. I didn't answer. Then came the part that made me smirk, the envelope. Remember the compliance lead I trained? His name's Marcus. Good guy, sharp, asked the right questions even when it made meetings uncomfortable. On my last day, I left him a sealed envelope and said only this: you'll know when to use it. He opened it 48 hours after I left. Inside, 1 USB, 1 smart card, 1 printed note. Biometric failsafe for Tier 3 modules. Authorization limited to non-executive compliance staff only. Do not escalate to leadership without risk matrix signature. If you're holding this, you're already too late. Marcus did exactly what I knew he'd do. He logged it, time-stamped it, filed it with the legal archive, and waited. By day 6, the vendor had submitted a formal request to halt transition. Lack of proper credentials is impeding knowledge transfer. That's diplomatic speak for, your guy screwed us. Chase tried to save face, called an emergency huddle, told everyone they were reassessing the rollout timeline, blamed unexpected infrastructure quirks. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that every day that passed brought them closer to the 30-day clause trigger. Tick, tick, tick. They still hadn't notified the client. They still hadn't secured a waiver, and they still thought they could fix it. But the system wasn't broken. It was just smarter than they were. The boardroom smelled like stale espresso and panic. Alan finally snapped. 8 days after I walked out, he called a clarity meeting. That's what the invite said. Not emergency, not crisis, just clarity. Like the truth had gotten lost somewhere under a pile of half-baked plans and Chase's motivational Slack posts. Everyone showed up. Legal, IT, finance, Jenna, even HR, which only ever emerged when lawsuits were circling like vultures. Chase was already seated when Alan walked in, tan faded, shirt rumpled, like he hadn't slept in days. The founder's usual forced optimism had curdled into something sour. He slapped a folder on the table so hard that the room flinched. Someone explained to me in English what the hell is happening with this contract. Legal didn't even bother with small talk. Evan opened his laptop, mirrored the screen to the projector, and pulled up one document. Title, Vendor Compliance Agreement, Federal Contract 2917B. He scrolled straight to page 78, no commentary, no padding. Just a bolded clause that might as well have been a live grenade, 13F, named Key Personnel. Clause termination, reassignment, or unapproved removal of the personnel named in Section 9.4, hereafter, Key Personnel, will render this agreement null and void within 30 business days, unless, A, the original personnel resumes duties in full operational capacity, or B, a waiver is signed and submitted by the contracting officer, CO, acknowledging replacement terms. Silence. Then Evan spoke. Her name appears in Section 9.4, Morgan Ellis. She's the only one listed. Chase shifted in his seat. Okay, but she resigned. That's not the same as being fired. It is, Evan replied flatly, because she was forced into a transition without proper notice. You muted her during a contractual compliance presentation. You announced an unapproved structural change. You publicly declared she'd be assisting with a handover she was never consulted on. He tapped his keyboard again. A second document flashed on screen. Additionally, the contracting officer has reached out. They are aware of the situation. Chase froze. Who told them? Evan didn't answer. Alan did. They requested a meeting, he said, voice low and slow, like every syllable weighed 50 pounds. But not with you, not with me, not with legal. He looked up, locking eyes with his son. They asked to meet with Morgan. The silence cracked in the corner of the room. Someone exhaled too loudly. The HR rep coughed like she wanted to disappear into her seat. Chase looked like he'd swallowed gravel. She can't do that. She doesn't work here anymore. Exactly, Evan said. She has no NDA binding her from consulting on external review, and because she wasn't properly off-boarded through the approved federal chain of custody, we can't prove she relinquished access responsibly, which means they trust her more than they trust us. IT chimed in, half apologetic. We tried a secondary override on her credential tree yesterday. It triggered a compliance audit alert. The system's hardened. No shortcuts left. Chase's face went pale, then red, then pale again. You're saying if we don't get her back, the whole contract goes into review and probable forfeiture. Evan cut in. $78 million, minimum exposure, add-ons, penalties, legal fees, could cross 85, and you've already blown 9 days of the 30. Alan didn't say a word. He just picked up a pen and tapped it twice on the table. Then again. Like a countdown only he could hear. The reality was sinking in now, not just for Chase, but for everyone at that table. I hadn't just left. I'd pulled the pin on a clause no one thought mattered, and now they were sitting in a sealed room with the timer ticking down. Boom, incoming. The first message came at 6:42 a.m. Chase Drummond. Hey, can we talk? Then again, 9:03. Chase Drummond, Morgan. Please, and once more, 12:12 p.m., after the board meeting meltdown. Chase Drummond. We just need to clear a few things up. Let me know what it would take. I didn't answer. I wasn't being petty, I was being precise. The moment I walked out, I became two things, a liability to them and leverage to someone else. That someone else being Veltrex Solutions. See, most people thought our contract was isolated, but federal compliance rarely works that way. Our project had a sister contract, same framework, same architecture, same audit window, awarded to a competitor after we passed phase 1. Veltrex got the sister deal 2 years ago. Different platform, same ecosystem. I'd worked with their engineers before. Respectable, not flashy, but sharp. A week after I left, their COO accidentally liked one of my old LinkedIn posts. 2 days later, a recruiter pinged me. We've followed your work for a long time. If you're ever open to new opportunities. Subtle, elegant, legal. By the time Chase was scrambling to call me, Veltrex had already called twice, and I'd taken both. They didn't want to hire me just to spite my former company. They wanted access to what I knew, to what I built. The moment Clause 13F went hot, they understood the value of someone who could walk into the same ecosystem and stabilize what the competition had torched. When they made the offer, they didn't negotiate, didn't haggle. They just sent over a document labeled Strategic Compliance Integration Role, EVP, and below it, a bonus tied directly to how many clients followed me within 90 days. Meanwhile, back at my old stomping grounds, the house of cards finally started to sag. 3 resignations hit in one morning. Jenna was first. She didn't even wait for a counter. Then Marcus. Then the lead security engineer who'd been my right hand in staging protocol review. Without me, they weren't just short-staffed. They were non-compliant. The handover plan Chase promised legal didn't exist. The vendor couldn't complete training because there wasn't a training environment. It was locked behind dependencies that only Marcus understood, and Marcus had just turned in his badge. HR tried calling people into retention chats. The Slack channels turned into dead zones. Messages sat unread. Tasks unassigned. And the risk matrix? It stopped blinking. It started pulsing. Then came the notice from the client. One polite sentence dropped into a formal email. Pending the resolution of key personnel status and transfer compliance, we are reevaluating our long-term partnership. Alan called another emergency meeting. Chase showed up late, eyes bloodshot, shirt untucked. You could tell he hadn't slept. They're bluffing, he said. No one walks away from $80 million. Evan replied without even looking up from his laptop. They don't have to walk. They just have to pause. That's enough to sink Q4. Jenna's resignation letter had one sentence in bold. I will not be party to a knowingly compromised federal contract. That line made the rounds internally. People started quoting it in whispers. And me? I said nothing. I posted nothing. I did nothing. I just let my silence do what my words never could. Take everything back. They held the meeting in the largest boardroom on the top floor. Windows blacked out. Lights too bright. Everyone pretending this was just another strategic check-in. It wasn't. Alan sat at the head of the table, but he didn't look like a founder anymore. He looked like a man who'd outlived his company. Wrinkled suit, hollow stare, thumb rubbing against his own knuckle like it owed him a favor. Legal led the meeting. Not Chase, not Ops. Just Evan, flanked by 2 outside counsels the board had dragged in over the weekend. First slide on the screen, a bright red header and a countdown timer that said everything in 5 words. Clause, 13F timeline, 11 days left. No one asked for clarification. They all knew. Second slide, a screenshot of the client's formal response. Plain language, lethal implications. We are evaluating continued partnership due to breach of agreement concerning key personnel transition. Translated, we're getting ready to walk, and we've got the receipts. Chase tried to speak, but Evan cut him off with a hand. Third slide, this one made the room flinch. Notice of intent to compete. Filed by Veltrex Solutions in Keo Project Scope. Integrated Compliance Rebuild. Proposal in review. Primary lead, Morgan Ellis. Someone actually gasped. I wish I could have heard it. It was done. On paper, on screen, in motion. They weren't just losing the contract. They were about to lose it to me. "Please tell me we can claw her back," Alan said, voice barely above a whisper. Evan didn't sugarcoat it. No, she signed nothing tying her post-employment limitations to vendor exclusivity. Her resignation was clean, time-stamped, and fully compliant with exit protocols. We ignored every warning she gave us. We can't claw her back. Chase slouched in his chair like a balloon with a slow leak. For the first time, he looked like he finally understood the weight of what he'd done. She planned this," he said, voice cracking. "No," Evan replied. "She documented it. You ignored it." They shifted to damage control scenarios, but it was hollow theater. There were no scenarios, not with the client already tipping, not with Veltrex moving in with a blueprint built from my hands, not with 3 more resignations filed that morning, including one from the finance director. Alan just stared at the screen, at that phrase burned into the footer of the Veltrex slide. Primary lead, Morgan Ellis. No fanfare, no quotes, just facts. Back when I first built the compliance infrastructure, I wrote one line into the documentation header. Jenna once teased me for it, said it sounded too ominous. System integrity is not defined by access. It's defined by awareness. I wasn't just ready for what came next. I was what came next. This wasn't a resignation. It was a reset. The press release came out on a Wednesday. Clean, minimalist, navy blue header, soft gray footer, just like Veltrex always did. No frills, no PR fluff, just a headline that meant everything to the people who knew how to read it. Veltrex expands Federal Compliance Division with strategic executive appointment. My name was halfway down the page, small font. No quote, no fanfare. Just one line that sent a shiver through every leather chair back at my former company. Morgan Ellis, Executive Vice President, Strategic Compliance Initiatives. No puffed-up accolades, no smiling headshot. Just a neutral photo taken in front of a brushed steel wall like I was already mid-meeting and had better things to do, because I did. The fallout at my old company started before the ink dried. The client didn't wait for day 30. They terminated the contract on day 25, cited clause 13F in the first paragraph, pushed the penalty straight to collections, didn't even offer a mediation window. That's rare. That's surgical. Then came the follow-ons. 2 additional clients tied to the same compliance ecosystem quietly pulled their Q1 renewals. One even sent a short note that made it all the way to the founder's inbox. We prefer to align with leadership that demonstrates foresight. By Friday, their project pipeline was bleeding out. The founder, Alan, finally released a statement. Short, clinical, stripped of ego. Effective immediately, Chase Drummond is no longer with the company. Interim restructuring of operations is underway. We remain committed to integrity and compliance. There was no mention of me, not directly, but every executive in that building knew whose silence had made that sentence possible. Inside the building, people said the whiteboard in Conference 4A still had my name on a diagram, circled in red with the words, "Resolve this," underneath. They never did. The system was still intact when I left, still clean, still compliant. It wasn't a detonation, it was a test. And they failed. At Veltrex, they didn't ask me to retell the story. No victory laps, no revenge fantasy. They just handed me a tablet and a badge with my new title already etched in glass. I spent my first morning reviewing their architecture, found 10 things I liked, found 7 I'd already built better, smiled once. Then I opened a fresh document. New framework, clean slate, and this time no one interrupted me mid-sentence. I never raised my voice, just my badge, and that was enough.